What's going on, guys? My name is Matt, and today we're going over grain mills, why you'd want them, the benefits, pros and cons, and some things that you'd want to look for when shopping for a grain mill. I also want to talk about my own grain mill, the Serial Killer, so that will be, if you're looking for a review on that, it's going to be towards the end of the video where I'm going to be specifically talking about the Serial Killer, but for right now, we're going to get right into the video. So there's two main reasons why you'd want to buy a grain mill. The first one is just to save money. When you can buy grain in bulk, my homebrew supply store sells 55 pounds of grain for around $53. So it's around 96 cents per pound. If you were to buy it just per pound, it's about $1.55 per pound. And again, this is just based on my own local homebrew supply store. So you're saving about, over 50 cents per pound, which will add up quite a bit over time. The second reason why you would want to own a grain mill is because you have complete control over your grain crush. If you rely on homebrew supply stores or online retailers to do the crushing for you, they might not regularly check the gap size to make sure it's still tight, and the rollers, if they aren't doing a lot of maintenance, still might not be in the best shape as possible, so your crush may not be getting done as efficiently as possible. Another thing too is a lot of the rollers that the retailers will use is a standard size gap. They're not going to adjust the gap size for every single customer. They can send it through 2 or 3 times, but it all depends on that crush size. When you're looking at mash efficiency, the best thing you can have control over is your grain crush. If you have not a fine enough grain crush, you're not going to be getting great efficiency during your mashing step. So for better efficiency too, you want to make sure that you are getting a good crush, and having a grain mill is the only way to ensure that you're getting a good enough crush. Now, if you're shopping for a grain mill, probably the first thing you're going to notice is that there's some with 3 rollers and some with 2 rollers. The 3 roller models have only one roller that is adjustable. So there's one that's adjustable, there's one, and then there's 2 that are static in the grain mill. What that's supposed to do is there's supposed to be a initial crush of around 60 to 70 millimeters, and then your adjustable roller at the bottom of the grain mill, you can adjust it to however thick you want. So then that's going to give you your final crush. For 2 roller mills, you again only have one roller that's movable and then the other one that's static, and you can adjust that to whatever gap you have. There's 2 main reasons why someone would want a 3 roller versus a 2 roller, and there's one major disadvantage to a 3 roller over 2 roller mills. The main advantages of getting a 3 roller is that it's faster and you can get more output out in a shorter amount of time. If you're doing 3 or 5 gallon batches, it's probably not a big deal, but if you're doing 10, 15, 20 gallon brew days, 3 roller might be the difference between a few minutes on your brew day. It's up to you if you think that's worth it or not. The only other thing that I would say is important that a 3 roller mill will have over a 2 roller is, again, having that additional roller. It pre-crushes the grain, it kind of opens up the grain, and then the second and third roller actually do the crushing for you. Some would say you would get a more efficient crush using a 3 roller, but again, with a 2 roller, since you own it, you can send your grain through as many times as you would like, and then you can get a better crush that way through the 2 roller as well. The one major disadvantage of a 3 roller over a 2 roller is cost. With the looking at cost, a 3 roller will cost you anywhere between $50 to $100 additional on top of what you would pay for a 2 roller mill. So you have to weigh out those benefits to see if it's something that's important to you. If you do think that's important, then maybe you need to start looking at a 3 roller over a 2 roller. Now, there's other things to look for when you're shopping for a grain mill. A few of these will include how much grain will the hopper hold. If you're doing large, like 10 to 20 gallon batches, it might take a long time to mill your grain if you have a little 6-pound hopper. So you want to keep that in consideration when you're looking at grain mills. Also, you want to look, is there an easy way to adjust the gaps on the rollers too? A lot of them have a nice easy way to measure on both sides where they have actually lasered in measurements on the side of the grain mill where you can set the depth of the grain mill. Others do not have that feature. Another thing you might see on the nicer models is the grain mill might not come with a base. It's just a grain mill, and then you have to buy the base separately. Though it is totally optional to do that. You can just simply get a piece of plywood, cut out a hole, and then mount the grain mill on the piece of plywood as well. Another thing you might be seeing is some grain mills have motors in them, and some are hand cranked. So for the hand cranked models, a lot of the hand cranked models, not all of them, but some of them also support a drill attachment. So that's something you want to look at the diameter of the shaft for the hand crank to make sure your drill would be supported. For the motor, that adds a significant cost to the grain mill. Personally, I would not recommend them with a motor unless you are brewing commercially, because it shouldn't take that much time to use a drill or a hand crank. You can buy a very cheap drill from Harbor Freight for like 40 bucks. So that's always a cheap way to get around the motor. The last thing I want to go over is how to operate a grain mill. There's different RPMs that are recommended for some grain mills that give you a more efficient crush. What I would typically recommend if you are using a drill to use the lowest speed setting, and then don't crank on the handle all the way. You want to get it as slow as you possibly can without stalling the drill. That's pretty much the right speed you want to be doing the drill attachment for. The faster you go, then the more flour you'll have. So again, you'll get a better crush with a slower drill. Another thing, talking about gap size, if you're doing brew in a bag like myself, credit card width is typically recommended, but what I would recommend doing is do a bunch of test crushes, collect, just maybe throw in a half handful of grain, and then test the crush on a bunch of different settings and look at them and mix them around a little bit to see if that's the crush you want. That's the best way to figure out what kind of crush you want. Also, over time, if you find that your efficiency is poor, you can continue to reduce the size of the crush, and then you can find out where a good middle ground is. Now, you are limited if you're doing traditional 3-vessel brewing, that if you're doing a sparge and a Vorloff, you have to be limited on your grain crush because you do not want a stuck sparge or, when you're setting the grain bed in traditional 3-vessel brewing. But if you are doing brew in a bag like myself, you can go as crazy as you want on the crush. The last thing I want to do is talk about my grain mill, the Serial Killer, which is a 2-roller grain mill. For me, the most important aspect of this purchase was the price point. This is sold for $105, and the website that I bought it from runs promotions all the time. I think right now they're running like a $10 store credit if you were to buy this. I think at the time that I bought this, I got a $20 store credit, so effectively this was like 85 bucks. It does come with a base that is pre-attached, so there's no need to buy a base or make your own base at home. This is a hand crank model, so it does come with a hand crank, though I do not use the hand crank. This does support a drill, so I just have a standard drill that I attach onto this, and it works just fine. So the drill is an important part for me because I did not want to hand crank all my grains. Another thing that you might see right off the bat is that it's a very small hopper. I think it's around 6 or 7 pounds, which is fine for me because I do 3.5 gallon batches. So just keep that in mind. You might have to constantly be refilling this if you're doing 5 or 10 gallon batches. Another nice thing about this mill is that on the side, both sides of the mill, there was 3 laser engraved gap size settings that you can adjust the gap size on. I've done a few test crushes on the largest, the middle, and the smallest. And just to talk about them for a second, on the largest crush size, it did crush the grain to, I would say, is a good crush for traditional 3-vessel brewing. And I would say it's on the verge of being not crushed enough, but it's definitely a good crush for 3-vessel brewing. I would say it's not fine enough for brew in a bag. The middle grade crush, I thought, was a better space for brew in a bag, and you could probably still get away with it in 3-vessel brewing, though you're on the verge of it being too fine. And then the smallest gap setting I thought was too fine. there was a lot of flour that was produced in the when milling the grain. So I would not recommend this size if you're doing traditional 3-vessel brewing. If you're doing brew in a bag, as fine as you want, is usually not a problem. Though I went somewhere in the middle to kind of a little bit closer towards the middle grade size, and I felt like that was a good crush for me. Though I'm still using this every brew day. I've used it about 5 times thus far, and I'm gonna still adjust this as time goes on to see what the best efficiency I can get from this grain mill. The only other thing that I wanted to talk about that I did not like about this grain mill is, I don't know if you can tell, but there is this blue plastic film that this whole thing was covered in. And it looked like when they manufactured this mill, they first produced the aluminum, and then they put the blue tape around the aluminum, and then they built the product with it with the blue tape still on the aluminum. So the blue tape is underneath all of the folds on the product. It is under all the screws. It is under a bunch of these weird spots that's very, very hard to get to. In fact, I don't know if you can see that, but I still have some blue plastic near my rollers. So it's something you've got to spend some time taking apart. I would recommend using a sharp razor knife to cut along the edges. That does great for getting like 99% of the plastic tape off the grain mill. But as far as getting underneath all the screws, I took all the screws apart to get all the plastic off, and it looks like I probably have to take off my whole hopper to get the rest of this blue plastic off as well. So that's the only complaint I have with this. But besides that, I think this is the best bang for your buck grain mill you can buy on the market. I do want to also open it up to you guys. If there is grain mills that you guys have been using in the past that you love, expensive or cheap or whatever, please post them in the comment section below. We can have a conversation down there, and anyone looking at grain mills can hopefully use this video as a reference, and they can check in the information section below, in the comment section below, and you can hopefully find a good grain mill that meets a lot of these features that you're looking for. But that about covers it. I hope you guys learned something about grain mills, and I hope you check out this grain mill as well. I'm not sponsored by them. They're not giving me any money, but I do think it's a good grain mill, and it's probably the best bang for your buck out there. If you liked the video, make sure to like and subscribe to the YouTube channel, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks, guys.